Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another Prevail Compliance Corner. I am Orly.
And I'm Noel.
And we are joined by two guests. No, you're not seeing double. We are joined by two guests. Only one of them has decided, though, to join us in person. The other one is joining us from the heavens. No, not the heavens. Joining us from the ether. He's joining us by audio only. So who do we have with us today? We have two of our friends from Redspin. We have Robert Teague. Say hello, Robert.
Hi.
And we have Thomas Graham,
Who's very shy.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, we were joking that he's a witness in the witness protection program so that you can't see him. So Rob and Thomas are two of our friends from Redspin. They are a certified C3 PAO. In fact, well, you guys you were one of the first few C3 PAOs.
We were the first.
Number one.
The first. Wow.
That's why I have no hair left, Orly.
Not that we can see that, but everybody
That's
can
why
see
he's
it.
not on camera.
Is that why?
Yeah, so Rob and Thomas, why don't you just take a quick moment to introduce yourselves? And Rob, why don't you just also tell us a little bit about what Redspin does, and then we'll jump into today's show.
Sure. I'm Rob Teague. I'm the manager of CMMC services at Redspin. 31 years in the U.S. Army, as you can see behind me, doing communications and cyber. And now manage everything CMMC for Redspin, which is a division of Synergistic. And my partner in crime is Dr. Thomas Graham.
Their names are Jekyll and Hyde, really.
Bert and Ernie is probably closer, but.
Yes, hello, everyone. As they've kindly mentioned, I am Dr. Thomas Graham. I am Vice President, Chief Information Security Officer for Redspin. That's my day job. My night job, I am a CMMC provisional assessor and provisional instructor. I've spent over a decade in the DoD world working primarily with DHA entities prior to coming to work with Redspin.
All right. Well, it is a pleasure to have you guys here today.
Thank you.
So today's topic is brought to us via our friend at Prevail, Jamie Loophole. Hat tip, Jamie, for bringing this issue to us. Jamie was telling us that the Discord server where he hangs out a lot, where he spends more time than most people at our company, but it's for a good reason because it keeps his ear to the ground. So here's an issue that Jamie told us he was hearing, was that some people were talking about being able to use just a policy to ensure that the CUI they were handling didn't get on their commercial platforms. And so that was a bit of a head scratcher because we've always thought, CUI needs to be on its own separate enclave. And so the question that we're going to discuss today is, first of all, whether that's bunk or not, can you use CUI on a commercial server? I think I know the answer, but we'll talk to our C3PAO friends and how assessors are going to look at this use of policy or technology to kind of manage the compliance requirements. Before we jump in there, Noel, you had an interesting thought about this. Why are people talking about using this in terms of a policy rather than a technology issue? And then when I say policy, we should be specific. We should say written policies.
Yes, written policies. So written policies meaning like I have a policy that states that this is the password complexity everybody's going to have, or, this is the least privilege that we're going to follow, that kind of policy. We don't mean a technological policy that you would set up in like Azure AD or something like that. Right. So yeah, so thank you for making that clear because Rob and Thomas are the ones who brought that up. So thank you. Yeah, one of the reasons I think this might be happening is because there is such a cost involved, and there has been, that's been a complaint from the DIB from pretty much the moment this started, basically. So like what, 3 years now, Robin, Thomas, it's been a while now, right? You guys have been with it from the beginning. And so in those 3 years, it seems like a lot, what we've heard over and over again, I know internally, we've heard that from, potential customers. I know you guys have probably heard it too, definitely. Well, this is so expensive. How am I going to afford this? So I wonder if part of the reason why we're seeing this sort of uptick of, well, I could just have a written policy and then I'm fine, is because, well, I don't want to have to buy whatever technology X it might be that I have to put in place with that policy in order to be compliant. That's my guess, because otherwise there's really not a whole lot of advantage to doing it. I mean, I guess it's a little bit easier obviously lift wise, but I think cost is probably more likely the key contributor. And then Rob and Thomas, by all means, whatever thoughts you have on it too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we've been seeing the same kind of a trend that we've been noticing is that folks are trying to find the, I guess, the easy button is kind of what you're referring to, Noel.
Absolutely.
Push that easy button, and then all
It's all done.
CMMC compliant, and
Right.
there's no such thing, right? The other thing is, actually, I remember the last webinar we did with Prevail. It was one of the listeners kept beating us up about, well, can't you just give us the policies?
Right.
Why do I have to buy a package from you? You should just be giving them to me. So that kind of easy button is what we're seeing. A lot of folks are lacking in documentation, which is something CMMC was really kind of driving at. That shows maturity for organizations, and it is part of compliance. So.
Well, before we move on, I do want to make a distinction. So Orly, you specifically, as well as Noel, you guys specifically brought up the question. Can you just have a policy in place for CUI and specifically with the control of email? Absolutely, you can. However, does it mean you're going to pass the tenets of CMMC?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, more than likely not. So
that's a very good distinction, Thomas. You're right.
But I am hearing in the back of my head, and ISO I used to work with, that just hammered into me, words mean something. And what I'm getting at here is that when you're looking at specific controls, around such as the controlling the flow of CUI, the administrative portion of it is the policy. That's what Rob is speaking to. And have the maturity requirements been taken out of CMMC? Absolutely. That doesn't preclude the need to have those administrative controls. But when you start getting into the actual individual practice areas, the individual objective areas, understand administrative is just one component of it. You still have to demonstrate it, or even when an assessor comes out, they could still test it. So with that testing, one of the questions is going to be, okay, so what if somebody sends it to a location that they're not supposed to? What's going to happen? Is it still going to go through, or is it going to be prevented from getting to that location at some point in time? And that's what's getting lost in the conversation around policies, is that it's not just I shall do this, but it's more of we are doing this. And those are two different words.
And here's a good analogy for you, right? So think of a kid and you got a cookie jar that they can reach. And you tell the child, no cookies till after dinner, right? Well, if you walk away and leave that cookie jar, they're going to go open that cookie jar and eat.
There'll be no cookies left. There'll be no cookies
right?
left in that jar.
So
absolutely.
A technical measure that you would put in place with that policy where you just told them don't eat the cookies till after dinner, a technical measure would be move the cookie jar out of their reach to where they can't get to the cookie jar. So you've got to have an administrative and technical control.
Right. And that kind of segues into the next point, I think, too, Orly, because one of the things, we were talking about, we think probably a big reason why people are trying to go down this sort of sneaky, easy button road, right, that doesn't exist, is because of cost. One of the ways that I've definitely talked to customers, potential customers, all kinds of different members of the DIB, and I know you guys are hearing this too, that the enclave, the enclave option is becoming way more popular now than it was maybe even 2 years ago. So with the enclave, is that kind of like taking the cookie jar, putting it like on top of the refrigerator, and then putting a lock on the cookie jar?
Well, the enclave is really more about taking the cookie jar and putting it in your pantry, and the pantry being able to be locked.
There you go.
It's putting it in its own unique area that is sequestered from the rest of your house, which in this analogy is your network. And it provides assurance that anything isn't going to inadvertently come out of that pantry or go into the pantry other than with that key.
Oh, that's a great point, Thomas, because you got to control, right, who goes in and out of that pantry.
No, absolutely. I mean, your point to cost, Orly, I mean, I'm sorry, Noel.
Well,
it's
yeah.
it's, it is something that comes up in conversations almost every day. I mean, it's the cost of doing business, and that's something, folks have to understand. But if the cost of protecting data is it, really something that should be looked at as, adversarial to your business? I don't think so. I think more and more as organizations, are moving into technology more and more as we are moving into an IT world, the onus is going to be on cybersecurity and the protection of the data being a strategic advantage if it isn't already.
Right.
Something outside the CMMC world is that the SEC has started having discussions, I think it was back in March, about somebody in the very near future that sits on the board of public companies has to have an understanding of cybersecurity.
Oh, wow.
So,
Oh, wow.
Heard that.
yes. So if you're looking at the DoD world, the DoD is supposed to be secure. They're supposed to be one of the main standards for how we're protecting data. And unfortunately, you have to have that technological component.
Yeah.
Which does become pricey.
Right. And so kind of just bringing the point you just made back to what we were talking about, just highlighting this, right? So this idea of putting your cookies in a cookie jar, it's you can't just have a policy, you need the technology as well. And so for people, who see that in terms of, can I use my O365 and just like have a separate folder where I handle all my CUI? Clearly not. The answer is no. You cannot use your commercial cookie jar to handle CUI. You need a specific cookie jar, whether that's Microsoft GCCI, Prevail, whatever solution you choose to use, whatever, fits your profile, you need that separate platform to handle CUI. There's a lot of technologies behind there as well. It's not just, using a separate email server. It has to, and you guys know this better than I do, it has to use FIPS encryption. It has to have be stored in a FedRAMP moderate equivalent storage unit, and the list goes on. So it's not just having a policy. There's a whole lot of technology that has to be satisfied as well.
Well, to add on to what you just said, Orly, it doesn't have to just use FIPS encryption. It has to use FIPS validated encryption.
Yeah.
I always
that
get
is a very big
FIPS
distinction.
That is a huge distinction. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and the separation has to be there because nobody wants chocolate chip cookies to mix with their sugar cookies, right? Because then you're gonna get chocolate all over your sugar cookies.
That would be
Yeah.
sacrilegious.
Or with your zucchinis or whatever else you're gonna have.
So, we're seeing there's really three types of environments, and that's really what an enclave is. It's an environment. It's a place where you're putting your CUI. So we see three types. One is on site or on premises, right? Which means they have a data farm somewhere of a bunch of servers in a server room. And they've isolated certain servers to control CUI. Those have to be segmented. They can't be mixed with any other portions of the network. It has to be its own living segmentation with security controls at the end to get in and out, right? The other one is a hybrid, which is a mixture of on-premises servers, a data center, and cloud storage, right? So they kind of do a mixture of both. Most of them in that case are actually trying to take the on-premise CUI data farms and move them to the cloud. Okay.
Got it.
And then the third, which is really honestly the most cost effective, is a cloud environment. If you think about it, you don't have to pay for the maintenance fees. You can grow it or diminish it as needed based on your business model. And there's that relationship with the cloud service provider where your documentation comes up to a certain point and their documentation takes over.
That inheritance is so key. Yeah, I think that's such a good explanation too of the different types. Cause yeah, I mean, how many times are you seeing on premises, like full on-prem solutions at this point? And I doubt it's very often.
Very rare. Well, they're out there, but they're
Oh
rare.
yeah, they're out there, but
Yeah.
there's not many of them. I think, you know, the vast majority of people, like you just said, it's so much cheaper to inherit all of those controls, like those physical access controls, those maintenance controls. You know, there's some of the, you know, there's so many different controls that you can usually inherit from somebody, even if it's just partially. That's better than what you had before, and you don't have to worry about as much. So you're right, that's way more cost effective to do that, definitely.
And so we're seeing a lot scale to that towards the cloud.
That tracks. I mean, that I personally do not want to manage a server by myself for a company. I have no desire to do that ever again. It's not an easy thing, and especially these small, you know, especially these, like what we like to call, like, you know, the micro smalls, the under 5 users, you know, that's just you got to have a dedicated IT person, at least one, if not more than one, right? So
that's a great point, Noel, because that's the other thing we're seeing is that CMMC has taken so long to come to fruition, which, by the way, you know, the first one's already underway. The second one kicks off here next week. So finally, after all this time where all of us have been waiting and working, it's now, you know, coming live. So all of these organizations that built CMMC folks to kind of manage their programs and make sure that once they were certified, they could maintain compliance through that 3-year period. Folks have up and left. They've gone to organizations, other organizations that are actively attacking CMMC to get ready now. Versus these that have been waiting, and now you talk to them and they're like, well, we can't start because we don't have anybody to help us get going.
That's a really good point. We hear that a lot too on our side. Definitely, we hear a lot of that. So so we wanted to talk about some of the controls, right? Or like some of the specific controls. So for example, like if I have an enclave, and I think that the controlling the flow of CUI, so that's AC level 2, 3.1.3. It's one of the baby ones at the beginning, right? It's one of the quote easy ones. I say quote because really, are any of them easy? But yes. So controlling the flow of CUI. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Rob and Thomas, if I say, well, I'm going to control the CUI, I'm going to put a policy out there that states that CUI is going to be kept in this folder on commercial. Nobody else is going to touch it unless it's it's only going to have CUI in it. The folder is only going to have access to these 3 people. Those 3 people are the only ones who have access. It's on the commercial cloud. What's the problem? Like I've controlled my CUI, haven't I?
Yeah. Well, so no. As you guys kind of alluded to earlier, you know, talking about validated FIPS, encryption, and all the other things, those are not sitting on commercial environments. Those are really applied to the CUI environment. I know.
Darn. Okay. So, well, what if I say then, for example, all right, what about the one of the other controls we've talked about? So this is, okay, fine. So I can't keep CUI in commercial cloud. Okay, whatever. All right. Well, maybe I decide that I'm going to keep all of my CUI on like one hard drive, and it's going to be locked in a box and nobody sees it, and I never touch it, and it's in a secure room, and I follow all those physical procedures. Well, what if I then maybe send an email that discusses CUI, or maybe somebody sends me an email that has something with CUI? And I decide that, you know what, just this one time, I'm just going to put it in a folder. It's going to be fine. I'll move it over to the hard drive later. It's no big deal. One of the items we talked about is AUL2 3.3.1, which is retaining system audit logs. I would be compliant in that scenario, right? Right? I'd be totally fine. I'm going to move it over to the hard drive later. It'll be okay, won't it?
Yeah, no.
Man.
I think you're developing these straw men, Noel, and each one of them is getting knocked down.
I know. I'm not doing a very good job of building them, apparently.
No, you're not.
So why would that one not work?
So the main thing about the audit logs, right? First of all, those are proactive. They're not, well, they're reactive, not proactive, I should say, right? So the logs, every device system should be generating logs where you can see that, right? So the logging information is one way. That's one of many ways. And you have to have this layered approach of security, right? So the other thing is if something's coming through or going out via email, you need some kind of email data loss prevention solution that captures those kind of trigger words that says, you know, like, I don't know, fuselage diagram, you know?
Whatever it is.
Definitely the DLP will stop that and say, nope, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
So,
yeah.
it's gotta, those controls have to be in place. And just telling somebody via a policy, hey, Noel, you can't send CUI data over commercial email. They're gonna find a way around it. You know what I mean? It's just the nature of business. I need to get you this document and I got to get it to you quickly. They don't mean any ill harm. It's just, I got to get this done quickly so that they have the information, and then they violate that policy.
Absolutely. No,
yeah.
I think that's so true. I think that one point right there is what you hit on. So I think every one of our listeners can understand that moment where you're like, I'm busy, I'm doing 6 other things.
Exactly.
I don't want to worry about this policy. I've got 12 other things in my head right now. You know, I'll just send it. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. You're right. I think that's one of the biggest issues that a lot of different companies are facing. So what about like, okay, well, what if, so I can't, you know, send it over commercial email. I can't save it over commercial email. This comes back to another thought. So if I wrote a policy that said, I'm going to track what my users do in the office, like where they're going, what they're doing. I say this policy, you know, they have to sign in and out when they come in, and they come in and they use devices that are, you know, inside this building. And I just say that they can do whatever they want on those devices. They just can't touch anything from anywhere else. And that's fine, right? That's enough, right? I'm compliant, aren't I?
Well, I mean, if you're a stalker, you would be fine with that potential. But no, in a CUI world, that's not going to hold water. I mean, anytime you're talking about a sensitive data type, and CUI is a sensitive data type, you have to have an understanding that just because you're sitting in a room that's guarded by, you know, 3 Apaches and 50 guys with M60s doesn't mean when they go out and hit their favorite website that it's not going to offload stuff to either Google Drive or mega.nz or, you know, whatever the case may be. You have to have, you know, those additional technical controls in there that says, no, you can't do this. I mean, you know, you may want to buy your CO or your contracting officer something off of eBay for their birthday, but you probably shouldn't do it from inside the enclave.
Yeah, probably shouldn't do it. And so, and to sort of like piggyback on what you just said, and you have to be able to trace the actions of those users. I have to know that user A, you know, if Noel is in this, you know, this magic room, this, you know, this skiff-like environment, well, not skiff-like, but close, you know, it's closed off and everything is internal. It's an internal network. If, like you said, Thomas, if I go onto eBay and start deciding to just like shop around for a while, I need to be able to trace that information back to a system user, because if I'm doing those things, somebody needs to know who's doing each of those things. So yeah, definitely. Again,
the other thing, just to kind of tie several of these together. So you started talking about controlling the flow of CUI, and you talked a little bit about, you know, some of the things you can do around DLP and how commercial email really is an option in this paradigm. But using your example of you're inside this secure environment and your users can just do whatever. Okay. What about, you know, attaching something to the computer? You know, how is an administrative policy going to prevent that? Say, okay, yes, we don't issue any of our users a USB drive or whatnot. Doesn't prevent them from having one in their pocket and still sticking it into the system.
Nope. It also doesn't prevent them from, you know, going to a different FTP and just clicking and dragging. I mean, you could, you're absolutely right. There's almost an endless list of things that could be done in that scenario that would not be controlled by policy at all. It's not going to even touch policy.
And you can see how these practices kind of are like a cogwheel. You know, they continue to work and interrelate with each other as you're moving through the CMMC process. So true. So true.
So, well, why don't we try one more?
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
we'll leave it there. Or maybe
Yeah.
some admins and admin and group policy.
Absolutely. I think we actually
Sure.
Thomas just actually hit on something we were going to talk about, which is the limitation of portable storage devices like the
Right.
USB drives. So it was perfect, Thomas. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
But,
Thank you
Perfect.
for teeing that up.
Yep.
yeah, that was perfect. But actually, I'd like to go to another one that I think is one that we get some questions about, and I'm sure you guys do too. Separation of duties.
Mm.
So this is a big one. So if
Balance the checkbook, he does the grocery shopping.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll pick Noel, the terrible employee here. So I am now working in this secure environment. I've got everything set up the right way now. I've got all the technological controls in place. I'm also the administrator for our entire internal system. So what I usually do is just, do all my administrative functions on the one, I just have one account because it's too expensive to have an administrative account and then a regular account. Like it's more money, it's more work. I don't want to have to like log out and log back in again. So like, I don't do that. I just go ahead and just like use the same, I just use the same one. There's a policy that says I'm not supposed to, but it just seems like so much work. So I just went ahead and set up my admin stuff on my regular accounts, and that way I don't have to switch back and forth. That's totally fine, right? That's cool, right? That's fine.
Making them softballs, make it hard.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was expecting her to break down some scenario with nested grouping or something.
No, I'm keeping it real basics.
You're making us look like the bad guys because I keep shooting you down.
It's okay. You're supposed to.
No, the reality is there must be a separation of duty. And why is that? Because, when you're in the administrative privilege role, you've accessed the network as an administrator, you have so many functions available to you that could jeopardize the security of the network. You could easily go in and switch a firewall rule that would change something and allow everything in versus blocking it and allowing it by exception. So that's just one example. Two is if they split tunnel out, which is another big piece, right?
Right.
They split tunnel out, go to some website and it says, hey, you need to look at such and such, and they click on it. That's now spread throughout the entire network because you're in an administrative role. The separation for the user is that they don't have those types of privileges. So they are very controlled with what they can do. They can come in and see this folder. You have the key, so open the door. Here's what's in the folder, right? When you're done, close the door and lock it. It's that simple.
But they don't keep the key, right? They have to give the key back to somebody else. And that person who holds the key, that's the tricky part. Yeah.
So you guys have talked about, the admin going out and doing these things, all of these things from the same account, which has administrative levels or administrative permissions in your environment. That's not the scariest part. Here's the scariest part. What if you get a fish email and you're opening it up under your administrative account?
Right.
If you every single day you will see something in the news about either ransomware or some other type of incident occurring. And about 90% of those at least can be traced back to a fish email. And it's because the fish, once you click on it, generally the malicious syntax or code that's in there executes under the permissions of the user. So if you are clicking on this now as an administrative user, guess what?
It goes everywhere.
Exactly. And that's the scariest part, because most organizations, they have, rules around their email and preventing this or that. You're never going to be 100%. And it's that extra 10% that you don't see that is the worst part, because now once it's in your environment, once it's made it through your wall, once it's made it through your firewall, once it's made it through your perimeter, once it's inside, most organizations don't have controls that limit the proliferation of information from within their environment. It's just when it's going in and out of the environment.
Right. No, great point, Thomas. And we actually did an incident response exercise where we did just that. We had an administrator in there on his active account, went out to his personal email, opened some file, and the ransomware picked it up and then used his email to spread it throughout the network. So then the question becomes, if you're doing
Wow.
incident response, which is another great question we get a lot, incident response, that's a great way to test your incident response plan, number one. But number two, there's validation that has to be done, right? So there's tools out there and companies out there that can test your security devices to make sure that when you're doing incident response and reacting to things, the devices are actually isolating and closing things down for you and operating as expected. So those all need to be done in testing with your incident response.
And
Yep.
I love the fact that we've told kind of a story here too, because that is really what CMMC is doing. When you have an auditor, like when you guys assessors, when you come in to assess a situation, you're looking for that story. Okay, we started with the controlling the flow of CUI. Okay, well, how are you doing that? Oh, well, there's audit logs that you're tracking. Okay, you're tracing the actions of all of your users. Okay, you have separations of duties so that there can't be these types of attacks, right? That what Thomas was talking about. You've limited the use of portable storage devices so that nobody's going to take the CUI away from where it's supposed to be. So like, I think this is a really good way to explain. I mean, are there really, I'm going to open this to Thomas and Rob, I know we're running out of time, but do you think there are really any controls that truly stand by themselves, or are they all interconnected?
All interconnected.
Yeah,
Well,
they
that is
have to be
great.
in most modern environments. I mean,
Yeah.
you can have controls that stand alone for, maybe their individual component, but when you start looking at modern computing, you start looking at modern environments, it's going to be very, very, very rare where you're going to find something that's going to stand alone. I mean, even when you start looking at mobile phones or mobile devices, does that stand alone and it just pertains to the mobile device? No, not necessarily, because now on the back end, you have to, within your organizational infrastructure, you should be managing those devices, some type of mobile management. You should be authorizing those individual applications that you're allowing to access your data. So while that pertains to mobile computing, that actually falls under CM. It falls under, some of the other practice areas that are part of CMMC, as well as a good internal security environment.
So
All
if
right.
I can kind of recap things for you, Orly.
All right, and then we'll wrap it up.
We'll call it quits. So you can't utilize commercial environments for CUI data because it does not have the proper controls.
Right, and
So
technology.
therefore, you need to seek some kind of GCC high or something cloud environment, right?
Or Prevail.
That has those controls. Prevail has beautiful. In fact, one of our clients is utilizing Prevail. Then also, if it's on-prem, everything has to be segmented and controlled. The whole premise of CMMC is to manage and control, right? Think of it like a military base. You're not just coming in the base. Somebody's checking your ID. They're controlling who's coming in and out. CMMC is the same premise. There's policies, which is administrative policies, right? Written documentation saying you can't do this. Then there's a technical control that you put in place that says, this is what the policy states. This technical control is to make sure you don't accidentally bypass this written policy, right? Because we all know the intentional piece, the insider threat, somebody that's sending that data out for money or whatever the case may be. But the big piece is the unintentional threat, which is really the biggest threat, right? That unintentional, because they mean well, right? They're trying to do well for the business, but you need that technical control to stop that piece, right? Otherwise, if you have a spillage, it becomes very detrimental to the organization.
Got to account for human.
Yeah,
human
written
error.
policy, technical. Yep.
Got to account
right.
for that.
How was that, Orly?
That was great. Thank you for that summary. And if you see my screen shaking, it's because my cat is trying to get in on the show.
Yeah, earlier my cat took my empty Kleenex box and was rumming it across the floor, so I had to grab it from her.
So in keeping with the discussion, is your cat authorized to be a part of this conversation?
Oh, that's a good question.
She is cyber certified.
Okay, good.
She has her certifications.
All right, guys. It has been real. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Prevail's Compliance Corner. We will, we look forward to having you back. You guys have been great.
Yes.
And vice
Definitely.
versa, Noel, we will have you back on Cyberspin soon.
Yes, let me know. I'd be
Love
happy
love
to.
working with you guys.
Yes,
Thanks
thank
for
you so
inviting
much.
us.
Bye, guys.
All right, have a good one.